It's not uncommon. It's something they do, and they've been busted for doing it before.
Are we at one of those moments in history in which there is the necessity for a new world order?
And I am Lisa Haven, and this is Justice Night, and we've got tons of stuff to talk about today. Everything from, well, the internet. As you guys are going to find out, we're basically witnessing the end of the internet, the death of the internet from the European Union, not just there, but there's also some new, fresh information surfacing here in America. But also we're going to get into a deadly plague that's risen, and even FEMA camps. Yes, FEMA camps, something no one ever wants to talk about. But we have tons to talk about. But for starters, Justice, will you give us a little breakdown and what is going on in the European Union with the internet and the GDPR?
Well, what's not going on in the internet with the GDPR? And that was kind of the preface, the start of which, for you, those of you, I'm sure many of you do, the General Data Protection Regulation. That was a law that went in basically to protect yours and my privacy. At least that was the intention. And funny part about that is, of course, within 24 hours, Google and Facebook get hit with litigation in excess of billions of dollars in litigation. And what's happening here is GDPR in its purest form was amazing, and it was going to protect your privacy and my privacy from getting put out to other countries. So if you gave Facebook information, they could not extend it out to, the likes of Cambridge Analytica. Well, that's great, except for what happened is somebody goes onto Facebook and says, okay, I want to enter your platform, but I don't want to give you any of my personal information. Well, that's litigation now under GDPR, which could be a good thing, but the enforcement of which is a little bit questionable.
True. And the thing about it is, with GDPR, for example, some of the things that did happen is under that new regulation, if you will, it rose. What's the technical term? General Data Protection
Regulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To break it down simply, that would be like, anything that they collect, any of your personal stuff, your name, your phone number, they're not allowed to do this on you without your permission or without more added detail, right? Your consent. And so this is causing a lot of people to basically shut down because they don't have that permission. And a lot of them were gathering that data regardless of what you or I thought. So there's some interesting points there. But on top of that, and that wasn't bad in and of itself. I think this is at least a decent way for us to start. But tell me what happened from there. Now the GDPR was passed, around a month ago?
Around a month, a little bit less almost.
What's this latest and greatest coming out of the EU? Let's start there.
Well, now we get into censorship in its finest. And what's happening, and just so everybody's aware, is the internet as we know it is about to disappear. It's about to cease to exist. And they've thrown down censorship in Article 11 and Article 13 in a new EU law that just passed this week. And basically what happens in these two articles is if I was to use and cite a news source, so when I broadcast to my YouTube audience, like you do, information, I like to validate that information to assure that everybody knows it's true and to know what those sources are. And let's say in that I quote an article, and I quote, let's say, a CNN or a Fox News or whoever it may be. Well, under the new EU law, I can no longer do that because I am copyright infringing. Well, it's kind of a really dangerous line, so much so that the 70 leaders of the internet come out and say, EU, please don't pass this. You're going to destroy the internet that we created, the internet of free speech, the internet of allowing free ideas, the internet of state-run media not controlling every single message that you and I get. Well, now with these articles, guess what? We're going to take a huge step backwards to the potential that the internet will only be state-run. Because the weird part, and I can talk all day about this because it aggravates the heck out of me, but the Facebooks and Googles of the world, guess what? If they get hit with copyright infringement, they have billions of dollars. They can fight any litigation. Well, what about the small guy? What about the small guy who, for instance, Craigslist is a perfect example of this. Craigslist had to shut down their personal ad site. And why? Because another law, you're jumping between multiple laws that are happening sequentially here. And again, this is my passion, obviously covering the tech side of things. You have laws now that Craigslist had to pull down his personal ad. Now that was actually due to Mr. Trump, who passed a law. Please.
No, go ahead.
FOSTA. Which came through, and what that did was to stop sex trafficking, which was in itself, the law was absolutely necessary. This is to protect our children, to protect our rights, to protect everything, because these advertisements were appearing on Craigslist personal ads, illegal advertisements, and so this law was put in place to stop that. Well, there's an unfortunate consequence to stopping that. And what happens is they opened up another section, another law, basically allowing, and this is putting things very basically, if I have my article or my broadcast on YouTube and I accidentally infringe on somebody's copyright, I'm liable for that. That's my problem. I have to fight that. Well, this section now opened up the law to where YouTube's now liable for it.
Okay, so let's take that logically. So if YouTube is now liable for it and not, I mean, you as a person, I would say, well, good, now I don't have to pay that fee, right? But what is the downside of that? Why is that a bad thing?
Big business. Because Facebook, and here's the most shocking statement of all, and I actually made it on a broadcast I just taped. I am not a fan of Mark Zuckerberg. I'm going to go on record. So, you know, we're going to say that right up front. I don't like all his thoughts, his policies. However,
he's liberal. He is liberal.
He is liberal. But Mark Zuckerberg is a businessman running an extremely successful business. So when he has to protect that business and these regulations come down on him, the GDPR, Article 11 in the EU Copyright Infringement Acts, basically, again, I'm paraphrasing here so we can reference them. What am I going to do? I'm going to protect my business. So I'm going to throw down every algorithm I can to stop you from potentially infringing on copyright, because I don't want to litigate that, because you're just going to cost me money and lawyers and time. And if I don't have to spend that money, I'm going to self-censor. Here's the scary term, self-censorship.
Well, that's true. Okay, so in other words, if I'm just because we have big news sites that are on Facebook. So if I go and, you know, I use some kind of clip from, you know, or let's take YouTube, for example. I think YouTube is even a more powerful example. If I go on and share a screenshot of a news article or read a couple things within that article, then all of a sudden, even though I'm not saying it all verbatim or taking parts of the article, because in America, we're allowed to share 1 to 2 paragraphs of that article legally.
Yes.
And we can. There's not really a law so far on whether or not you can share a screenshot, but everybody does it, and it's been accepted as long as you're not reading the whole article and calling it on your own and giving credit where credit is due. Well, if on YouTube, then what you're saying is now it could be possible, per se, if, you know, one of those people can come back and say, I don't like the fact that you're using this, so they're going to strike now YouTube. But YouTube is going to hit my channel in return. And so now YouTube's gotten sued, but as a result, that funnels down to me and they're going to kick me off because now I've cost the company a lot of money. Versus the freedom of, if I do it, then the sin is mine. If you do it, then the sin is yours. That would be the logical way to do it, I think. I mean, if I'm going to sit there and copyright someone, that's my problem. I believe. That's what I believe firmly. Because like you're saying, and this is what I think you're saying, is that companies like YouTube are just going to basically censor us all to oblivion and censor us all out for fear of paying hefty fines.
That's my fear. My fear is that a step further, the Lisa Havens of the world will cease to exist, because YouTube's going to say you're too dangerous for me because I don't agree with your message, and then you take it to a message platform, let's say, and you take this back to the basics of internet and artificial intelligence and everything that's happening right now, and it's all based on the Googles and the Facebooks using algorithms to control messaging. Well, are they really controlling messaging, or are they protecting themselves? And this is the argument and debate we all have to have, because as much as I love to hate Google and love to hate Facebook, I have to understand what they're doing as business.
They are staunch liberals still as well. And
absolutely.
They do censor right now. These rules are not in place underneath them at this point, but they're still avidly censoring. But at this time, it's not because of the money pocket. It can be in the very near future. It's a political view right now that they're targeting. Any conservative, anytime you're talking about even Christians, Catholics, Christians, conservatives, patriots, gun owners, you love the Second Amendment right now, that's who's under attack. But they can simply start under this new kind of, now this isn't in America right now, correct? This is just... But
their companies are international. So
Yes.
if they put a law through in one country, does Mark Zuckerberg and even Google have the platform or the wherewithal to just censor in Europe? Or are they going to take that and spread it through their entire platform? In my opinion, they're going to go ahead and spread it through their entire platform. It's easier. Why would I make one law for Germany, one law for the United States, one law for Italy? It'd be too much to monitor and to maintain, because everything's coming through one server. Well, multiple servers, or the cloud, depending which way you want to go. So if I'm going to initiate a regulation on my own company, if I'm going to self-censor my own company, the danger and why we have to look at internationally what's happening rather than, even though I'm a nationalist and the United States first and every right, I have to pay attention as a tech expert to what's happening globally.
Yes, but I don't think they'll actually get to the level of making it that I hope to God. I pray,
As we hope
Lord,
to.
please, can we just pray that that doesn't ever happen? Because, I mean, we're talking about countries like China, for instance. You guys know I've talked tons on China, and China is a very communist, very dictator. I mean, the guy kills his generals and very bad, and he wants to be dictator forever, right? He's trying to change the rules. And this is the same censorship policies that they're attempting. You have these kind of negative policies where in China you can't even be on Facebook, or you can't even say anything negative because it affects your credit score, right? You talked about this, I talked about this. You have these credit scores that people in China are labeled with, and it's like, okay, if you say something negative about the president, you got a negative score. Well, how do you think they find that? They find that information on the internet. So, oh, you said something bad about Xi Jinping, dashed a point. You didn't pay your bill on time, dashed a point. You bought a VPN, a virtual private network, which they're illegal in China and Russia, by the way. I think Russia's in the process of. But a VPN is something that basically scrambles your IP address, so people don't know what you're looking at or surfing through. This was one reason why people in China were able to access Facebook and YouTube and things like that. Now they've made it illegal. So it dings their scores. And if they have a low enough score, you can't fly, you can't get certain transportation. So it's this score that hangs over your body. But imagine some dictator like that, who we're already sharing the internet with, but to have it global, there's so many different countries fighting you. And then you take Iraq, Iran, who have versions of the internet, very propagandized and controlled. Thankfully, in America, as it sits,
Yes.
we've got propaganda and everything, but we do have the freedom to get up here and say certain things, at least for the moment, because day by day goes and we're censored more and more.
Well, you have so much happening because in your geopolitical environments and how everything's adjusting, and we wonder if Republican and Democrat makes a difference anymore. And you and I have talked about this many times. And
Yeah.
does it or does it not? That's up for debate. But what's happening now is when you take this internet of everything that's being created and these megaliths of companies, and you take a Zuckerberg and a Google, there are very few people who actually understand what's happening in the internet. When Trump passed a regulation and I went crazy about it, it's because I don't think he fully understands the implications of what he's doing, because nobody does.
Well, tell us a little bit about what he did specifically in America. You said it was the sex trafficking law, which was good.
Yes.
But what hidden portion of that, and what was it, and what did it do?
Yeah, very basically what he did is he tried to stop the sex trafficking, so sex workers, prostitution, and he tried to put a regulation in place to hinder that. Let's say to take it off of Craigslist in a personal ad, so that was no longer allowed.
That's right.
And so but he opened up a section because now Craigslist was liable for those ads appearing on their platform. Prior, the person responsible for the ads was responsible for them, and Craigslist had to do its best due diligence to try to monitor those out. But so
it's like a loophole.
It's a loophole
that didn't get fixed yet.
He opened up the loophole. He opened it up now that says that any platform is now responsible for the third party that is putting information on that platform. That's dangerous, because you and I are a third party putting something onto YouTube's platform. So what happens now, you opened up a loophole which allows them to censor me or self-censor themselves if they don't want to be open to litigation.
Now, does it apply just to sex trafficking articles as it sits, or is it open to everything?
Like any good law, it's open to interpretation and litigation, and that's why everybody's very nervous about it. And that's what we have to watch for here in technology in itself, is the things that are being created, I don't believe anybody knows the long-term implications for. And the social credit score is very interesting you brought that up, because social credit score in itself is a self-monitoring mechanism. Because if I can't maintain and watch every person in my society, I can easily attach a score to them, so that no matter what business they go into or no matter what they try to do, buy an airline ticket, a score is automatically applied. So I no longer have to monitor, because now all my cameras will monitor. They'll attach by who, and China's amazing because of just the facial recognition software. And if I happen to be walking next to the wrong person, I'm going to get dinged on my score. And this is how it works, folks. It's terrifying. I've listened to certain experts who believe that we're very nearing a social credit score, but not in that form. It's going to be sold to us in the fact that for you to be able to put stuff on the internet, you'll have to have the correct score. because then you're less of a liability, which falls right in line with the policies we're talking about.
Now that brings up a good point that we actually talked about before. But before I say that point, hopefully I don't lose it. Just remind me, Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, keep on. Yes.
What I want to say is, with Trump, I love a lot of what he does. He's an amazing president.
We both do.
Obviously, there are things that happen that you don't agree with and you don't like. So I just hope that he fixes this loophole and gets down to the nitty gritty on that. Now, talking about our social credit score, we don't obviously have one here yet in America, but I think a version of it already exists. Like, what I mean by that is Elon Musk, for example. Yes. I think he's the one, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's the one that put it out there that said he's going to create a system in which the average everyday person could label journalists trustworthy or not with basically a score. And he was going to call it Pravda.
Yes.
Or D-U-H. Pravda.
Yes. I'd have to look it up too because I can't remember the exact letters he used.
It's D-U-H. Yes. But I mean, not that that's a bad thing, but right there, it is. I think journalists need to be labeled and judged by the American population or any population. It's great, but you do have that potential. For example, I brought this up. David Barak, he's Media Matters guy. He created Media Matters. Staunch leftist, globalist, liberal. Please don't read anything by Media Matters. It is such a propaganda site. But this guy, he put together this meeting of major, millionaires, billionaires, and 100 top people that backed Media Matters. And he said, I'm going to hire hundreds, thousands. It may have been tens of thousands of people. And this is in, if you Google David Barak Media Matters document, it'll come up. But in this document, in this report, he hires people, and they're hired right now to go on any more conservative website, more patriotic, nationalist, populist website. Populist just means, in case you don't know, those who believe in a higher global elite ruling from behind the scenes. This is the truth. It just is. That does exist. A nationalist means you just love the heck out of your country and that's it. Well, anybody who is on that side, he's hired them to troll the internet, to leave negative comments, negative reports, down likes, dislikes, follow certain media personnel. And this is something happening right now. Now imagine those same trolls. Now this is something the right hasn't perfected. They don't do this. I've never found a single document where they hire people, but the left is very good at that because they have to gain votes, and the only way they do it is to brainwash and propagandize the masses into believing that's the normal. So they've hired all these trolls. Imagine that same trolled paid army pretending to be your average citizen, downvoting journalists who really are really good, or downvoting people who are really good. But these are the kinds of things that we're faced with. So at a level, we kind of have that, and not just, in that manner, but we have the police departments. There was even a story going, now nothing came of it as of yet, but the police departments were given a certain criteria. Say, okay, well, if their Facebook profile looked more dangerous, they'd give you a red color or a blue color. And so if a cop pulled you over, there was a color already assigned to your name based off your social media. Now, as far as I know, this never went through, but it was on the table. And this is outside of the public. The public couldn't say yay or nay to this. This is something they were just doing in the police departments and whatnot. And so if they pulled you over and let's say for whatever reason you're labeled red, well, now that cop is on high alert, right? Because you got a social media profiles and you support the Second Amendment. And I love the NRA, Moulin Labe, but there you have it. So you're a Second Amendment supporter. Now you got a red label. Now you have to be careful because when that police officer pulls you over, they're on edge, whether or not you've committed a crime or not. But these are the kinds of social media score versions that have been brought to the table here in America. So it's not a far-fetched thing to say that we're far off. I think it's closer.
We're not at all. And it's funny because you brought up the trolls, and that's a really good pace because when you go into the copyright directive that the EU had just passed, and when you say copyright directive, you got to remember this applies to memes, this applies to artists, this applies to politics. And why do I say that? Because when you get into these copyright directives, let's say that I take a picture of Lisa and I put it up on on my website, and it goes viral, which, how many times does that happen? But nonetheless, that meme, let's say that
Depends on the photo.
Yeah,
It's a good
and I
photo.
put a little caption on there and it goes viral and I forget to copyright it. Well, these copyright trolls will sit out there and they'll grab that image.
Whether or not I've done anything wouldn't matter.
Yep, doesn't matter who they are. We don't even know who they are. Maybe somebody in China grabs it, throws a copyright down on it, and then somebody else goes and uses it. Well, that troll now controls that copyright and they profit from it. Well, there's no regulation against that. They didn't write that in because they don't know how to write it in. And nobody really understands. It's kind of like talking about net neutrality. That's the other prong of this attack that we haven't even discussed yet. Because net neutrality, and we could go all day on net neutrality, but we're going to try to, I saw a Burger King ad, and it's amazing how they did it. Burger King does a study because they want everybody to understand net neutrality, and it's a cool little clip. And they show, somebody comes up to the counter, and there's the clerk there, and he's at a Whopper. And she goes, I want a Whopper. And basically, and I don't have the numbers correct, but conceptually this is correct. He goes, okay, I can get you a Whopper for $5, but it's going to take 25 minutes. I have a Whopper for $15, and it will take me 10 minutes. Or if you want a Whopper right now, it's going to cost you $25. That's net neutrality in a nutshell, because if we allow these big companies to control the message, they're going to get at you very fast the message that they want. But the independent media, us, if they don't want you to get it,
gone.
They're not either going to put it in the service that you pay for, or it's going to take so long to get the message, it'll probably be 2 weeks old by the time you hear it. And that's where you start to get into this credit score that they may or may not use here, because for guys like Zuckerberg and Google, that's actually a really handy tool, because all I have to do is look at your score now to see how safe you are. And what's that determined by? Well, where you hang out, who you hang out with, what you've done, what crimes probably what university you go to, probably where you live, probably what car you drive. These are all the things that we're talking about with these algorithms and big data that everybody's utilizing, but nobody yet knows how to control. So they're writing laws against stuff that they can't even monitor yet. Nobody can. Only the uber elite tech gods can figure all this out. And that's a scary word to use, because there's only one God that we all serve. But in this world, these guys actually think they're a version of that, which is terrifying. But they control everything that we see, everything that we do, everything that we know, everything that we touch. And there's a handful of people who actually understand what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And the information's not as developed as we think it is. And that kind of takes us to where net neutrality could be the fourth prong in this attack.
Yeah, that's definitely a prong in the attack. And another thing I want to add is, as far as the copyright is concerned, look, this doesn't just affect, say, you and I in the news. It affects everyone. And if you want to talk about killing the internet, the EU's latest ploy, that what you were talking about, will do that. Not the GDPR, that's great, but the what was the other one called?
Oh, on the copyright directive?
Yeah.
Yes.
The copyright directive.
Yes.
So this is the other thing it could do. Say you have a YouTube channel and you talk about herbs, natural remedies, these kinds of things. Well, imagine some naturopathic doctor, now whether you got that information from him or not, he could say, hey, they're using my lemon with honey and water recipe. That's mine. They're copywritten and struck off there, even if you had nothing to do with that person. Here's the other thing that I had spoken about before, is this can expand eventually beyond the borders. Say you had a doctor coming on talking about certain things or that he can do, right? Well, if there's another doctor that does that same practice, you can copyright that. But say it even goes beyond the realms of, this is something they tried to pass in the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Mm-hmm. I was very against this, and I was very burdened by the TPP, which Trump thankfully did the right thing and squashed it dead. But the TPP, when it was revived and up, it had a hidden little verbiage in there. And this was outside of the internet, but it said copyright laws shall be added into. And so what this copyright verbiage in the TPP did is it actually, I believe it did affect the internet in almost exactly the same way of what happened in the EU. It was hidden in that verbiage. Not only that, but it also affected outside of that. Say, how would that work? Well, one example that I was given in regards to that is, say you have a doctor and this doctor specializes in a surgery. If he trains other doctors to have that specialty, they go out, open their practices, and they have practices, they train, and it goes down. But the ultimate benefit is for you and I, or whoever receives that specific surgery, because this surgery can be performed by multiple doctors. And this copyright law would make it so one doctor had that copyright and he was the only one allowed to do that particular surgery, which means no more open surgeries for people. You have to fly all the way to one area to get it done. And good luck at trying to get in to see that doctor. This is the ludicrousness that we see hidden in things like the TPP, and that's why we have to pay attention to some of those added loopholes, because people take advantage of the loopholes. It's just been that way from day one. But back to the internet. We need to watch it, because if we don't stand and do something, we're going to lose it.
We're going to lose it quick, and it's happening in everywhere. You brought up medical on the internet, and information was interesting. I did an article this week on how even your medical practices are being infringed upon. Your rights are being infringed upon on the internet because, I titled it, sensational, of course, that Google's going to predict when I'm going to die. Well, that's kind of a joke in one ways, but other ways it's not.
Right.
Because on this internet of things, just keeping with the internet and information and how can we fight it? And that's the biggest comments I get on my stuff is, well, great, you're telling me all the things that can go wrong, but how do we fight it? Well, you have to be very cognizant of the information you're giving to the internet. Even I have vast improvements to make on that on a daily basis because it's just so easy. It's right here, right? I can just hop on your phone and, oh my gosh, I got to sign in. I got to find out this information. Even us as journalists, when I want to go into a certain website and I want to pull back that article, guess what? It makes me put in my information. What information I give it, I'm not going to say, but it's not always accurate. But nonetheless, it gets me that, well, what happened is they're starting to track your healthcare records now. And they're starting to take information from all of us and determine, the bot determined how long you may be in the hospital, if you're going to return back to the hospital, and what your mortality rate is when you're going to die. Well, going back to what Lisa was just saying, if they're able to do that, how far of a stretch is it before they start to determine where I should go to get my treatment? And what happened to the days where I prefer a doctor because of their bedside manner? Well, that's not going to make a difference in algorithm world. And I keep dropping the word algorithm, and to be fair to the audience, and I know many of you already understand this. An algorithm is when you get a huge amount of data. Let's go to the simplest term. We were talking earlier today. Algorithm started with marketing. So Lisa decided she's on the internet and she wants to buy a pair of shoes. She's really good at it. But, and so she's...
I like shoes.
She likes shoes. And so the advertisement that she clicks on just happens to be white and have a female on the left-hand side of the advertisement. And that seems to be the shoe she clicks on the most.
No, I like little guys in the corner with a little bit of red background. That's what I prefer.
See?
Just saying.
So
Get it right.
Facebook or YouTube with her guy and her little red is now collected that data. Well, it's start of an algorithm because now it knows what Lisa prefers. Well, guess what? It takes that information and now it comes to our election time. And our election time, I got to find a way to get a message to her to make sure she votes for my candidate. Wait, what does she like? She happens to like the red background with the little guy in the corner. So if I design an ad with that same information, Mind Control 101, she's more likely to click on it and click on my ad. So why do you think Facebook and Google and all this information is being collected and the European Union is trying to put down the GDPR to control this privacy data because they know how valuable it is? Zuckerberg and Google know exactly what they're doing because they know how valuable it is. So much so that they sold some of it inadvertently to Cambridge Analytica, or so they say, so that they can affect an election because they knew that the trolls that you talked about earlier can take this information, compile it for, what was kind of sidebarred as a whole Russian deal, but that wasn't really the basis of what was happening there. What was happening there is Facebook knew they had very valuable data, and they used it. And they used it to impact an election. And this is not over what you saw this week with all the FBI scandals.
They didn't even use it to impact Trump. It wasn't even about Trump.
Nope.
There is so much more
it's so
pushing
deep.
Hillary Clinton
Yes.
than anything else. And that's the thing. The amount of I guess, crimes against Russia that were pro-Trump were nothing in comparison to what was out there for Hillary, specifically with China, not only China, but other countries as well. So there's so much. And that's the thing. You spoke a little bit on the propaganda side. And this is something that they're using more and more and more. And when you study things like, if you guys watch my channel, by the way, for you listeners out there, check out my YouTube channel. It's Lisa Haven, and then Justice Knight also has a YouTube channel, JUSTUS Knight. So make sure you guys check both of those out. But back to propaganda. On propaganda, the way that I listened to a video clip, it was the former editor-in-chief of Time magazine who came on, I think it was World Economic Forum, or it was one of the forums. I'm 50-50 on whether or not it was World Economic Forum, but one of them. But he came on, he's the former editor-in-chief of Time magazine, and he came up and he said that he is all for propaganda. And he says that everybody does it. And we already do it here in America, which basically is your 100% admittance that, hey, you're being propagandized by Time magazine. This is the former chief of Time magazine here. He's saying we use propaganda on you. So that is basically an open door saying, look, this is what's happening, this is what's going on. And you and I expose this a lot, the levels of propaganda. And I'll talk to my children. These are other things. You can, if a lot of this stuff happens here, like you're saying, and it comes from the EU and eventually migrates here, which I pray against. I encourage you guys. You guys are lots of Christian audience out there, so be in prayer. But if these kinds of things happen, you will be fed propaganda from here on out. And that's it, because the freedom of non-propaganda, the freedom of going on the internet and Googling something saying, I want to find out if President Trump did blah, blah, blah. Well, the chances of you getting multiple stories and a yes answer or a no answer right now are huge. You're going to see both sides of each thing. Well, in the future, what they're attempting to do, and I've heard many globalists and elitists bring this up in World Economic Forum, at Davos, even talks about it. You can't hear the talks on Bilderberg, but the agendas are on the table. But lots of things have been leaked out of these meetings, in which the idea is to say on Google, there will only be one response. So if you Google, did Donald Trump collude with Russia, you will get all leftist narratives saying yes, 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 versus a yes and a no. So we have to be very attentive to that going forward, because that is definitely something that we could see happen. And right now, what you're seeing is that already happening. You put in Donald Trump, did he collude with Russia? Because Google is a leftist organization, you're getting left, 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 left. And even semi-good, I guess, Fox News is probably one of the best evils out there. They get pushed to the bottom of the barrel. And there is no way that you're going to get news outlets like Breitbart, like InfoWars, like Christian news sources. Those are nowhere to be seen. And they're definitely, I guess, something that the Bible warns about as well.
Yeah, it was interesting today while I was driving around. I was listening to an article on Jaron Lanier, and he's one of the pioneers of virtual reality. And we talked about our teenagers are, everywhere, but they live on their phones. And you guys have seen this, and you watch your kids, and they're on their couch and continually on the phone. Well, this is and the selfies that they continually take, and and we make fun of them, we joke, but that's all they. Yeah, she's good at it.
Selfie,
she does it.
selfie. Watch it. Cheese.
There we go. Good. See, now we get send that to the kids. But nonetheless, it's challenging, because what he warned about is he basically said, get off of social media. This is one of the pioneers of virtual reality. He's been instrumental in Hollywood movies. His whole basis was that this internet has become a paid device. Well, net neutrality, like we talked about, the basis of the internet was to be free, to be a free portal. And he joked about it. It was kind of funny because he said, who invented the internet? Al Gore, right, was always joking, I created the internet. Well, yeah, he said, and even though we both don't like him, the guy actually said, well, hold on, he kind of did. And here's why. He didn't invent the coding. He didn't invent the actual technical portion of it, but he invented the fact that everybody should be allowed onto it, and actually allowed for that to happen through legislation. And it was an interesting take on it. But what he's trying to state, that what happened is when net neutrality didn't pass, that internet companies have to make money. Well, they have to make money through advertising. And the guys who took off were Google and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these social platforms, because they give impressions to our children. Well, our children right now are bound by those impressions, because the algorithms are working. The algorithms are showing them what they're interested in. It's keeping them on their phones, which is beautiful, because this is the biggest mind control device that's ever existed. To the point where in my article today, you got to do a double-edged sword, because it was, should we be on our phones in the car? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. We got to stop that, because we're getting so bound to it. Transhumanism, which is a big term we'll throw around. What's happening is they're creating algorithms that control our children and the message. So it's very easy before, think about even when I was raised and you had to find political candidates, you went to look at the sign in the yards, right? Mm-hmm. And the guy would come around with the old, writing, you got to sign me up so I can run. And that was amazing because you went to town hall or you went to the school and you got to listen to the guy talk or the lady talk. And I'm like, this is amazing because you got information. You got to see who that person was. Do you see that anymore? When was the last time a congressman or anybody's walked up to our door to get doesn't exist anymore? Well, our kids have no reality or no perception of how that works. What they know now is who's got the biggest bang for their buck on their phone. And that's going to be done through algorithms. So now we're allowing Facebook and Google basically to determine all our future messages. If net neutrality does or doesn't, it's already been dropped because the FCC decided they didn't want to, they wanted to dump it. So that was the end of net neutrality according to the FCC, which how somebody's not in jail right now for that, I still don't understand. But nonetheless, we're going to digress because that's about to go up to the Capitol in a week or two. And they're going to pass what could affect the future of our...
And this is...
net neutrality.
That's a monster.
This is the big one. This is the big topic.
I'm going to take you a little bit backwards in that conversation because I think maybe we've arrived at the zombie apocalypse.
I know you do.
I'm just saying because, we have a bunch of people walking around on their phones. Yes. Nobody's paying attention to anything. And it's like, duh. You guys all know what I'm talking about. And if you have teenagers, then you definitely know.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, we're all zombified. We're zombified walking around on our phones. We're zombified sitting in front of the TV. Yeah. You actually get more brain cells staring at a blank wall rather than at a television.
Well, why? Because
just saying.
We forgot that we can self-regulate. We can control our own messages because now we've allowed these computers to control our message, and that's the hard part. And everything in our society, and going back to the gentleman I was talking about, CNET, Jared, he comes out and says basically, what's the matter with the free market economy? Why can't the internet self-regulate itself? By the way, we never needed net neutrality because there was nothing broken in the first place. It was a complete sham because we thought that, basically these one companies were going to be able to take over all the bandwidth. Well, guess what? When they went to charge the customers didn't pay for it. And the ones who offered the free services, and I believe this was, it was an iPhone app. It was FaceTime. Some companies started charging for FaceTime. Well, the consumer didn't pay for those companies and they went to the ones who offered free FaceTime. So it self-regulated itself. And that's what's the scariest out of everything that's happening because are our kids going to know how to self-regulate themselves? I don't know if they will. They won't know who to contact or how to talk or how to communicate. They'll only communicate through this. And the scary part about this is that even when you're on Twitter or Instagram, which I've proven on many articles, how many of that is actually a bot and not an actual person on the other side of the phone?
True. The other thing is, this is something we were warned about. Biblically speaking, a lot of the Christians out there know. In the Bible, it talks about in the latter days, the time where we're getting closer and closer to tribulation time, to the end times. Mm-hmm. It says that sons and daughters will turn on their parents. They will turn from their parents. They will be blasphemous. They will be lovers of self. They will be, just spoiled. And maybe we see a lot of that rising because they're so stimulated on, not only we have Fortnite, we have video games, we have television, have YouTube, you have, and by the way, this is very stimulating for your brain when you listen to like newsy things because it gets you thinking and moving all along. So there are good things to it. There are good things as well. There's good things that you can learn on computers and the internet, but there's also things that when you're just watching or listening to music, for example, a lot of what your kids are getting are murder, rape, divorce, abuse, cussing. This is the negative that they constantly hear in music and radio and, seeing that kind of blood on the television. It's almost as if we're living in a culture that has been neutralized to violence. Ergo, the reason we see more mass shootings, and this doesn't even to get into account, false flags and stuff. That's a whole nother topic.
Oh, yeah.
But for now, this is something that God warned about in the Bible, and I see a lot of immorality rising. And in 1963 was when they removed prayer out of schools. If you look up the statistics on that, I encourage everybody, check it out. Go Google 1963 prayer removed, and then you will see, since almost to the day it got removed, that crime skyrocketed. And see, the people who were living in that generation did nothing to stop that regulation. And I want to be loud and clear when I say this. I don't want to be the generation remembered as the ones who couldn't stop prayer in school. I want to be remembered as a generation who brought it back, or as a generation who stood on the grounds of God, a generation who said, hey, you're not going to kneel, at our anthem, or who says, hey, you're going to stand up, respect our country, and respect that we were founded on godly principles, and that under God is where we reside.
Because we've lost morality. We've taken it out of everything that our kids know. And when you're dealing, and I know we did an article, or we covered an article on the potential of a version of the Antichrist and what's being created through this artificial intelligence, because the messengers now of modern day are not the preachers and not the priests anymore. Now it's the internet and the screen, and that's where the rise of a false prophet is extremely easy. If you watch some of our broadcasts, and mine in particular on this specific topic, I'll show you imagery that will shock you. You won't be able to tell if this is actually Lisa next to me or if it's a computer-generated image. See, I just validated, actually. That's what's going on. That's why we...
Do I look human? It is human. Do I bleed?
Yeah, I don't know. We won't do that here. But that is the scary part of what's happening, because this technology is advancing so quickly. And the theory is that it will keep expanding on top of it, and it's the rise of knowledge. And that
also talked about in the Bible.
Very much so talked about the Bible. And we're in that generation right now, and such an increase in knowledge that I don't think anybody knows where the potential or future will lead. They don't. And I'll say that because when you watch and you read these articles and you read these exposés and you read the advancements, sometimes they surprise themselves. Even the leaders of the industry are like, we didn't expect that to happen. We put in the algorithm for this artificial intelligence, and the next thing it programmed itself. Well, sometimes I worry if they're lying and being false prophets themselves, or if that actually happened. You have people now who believe in what's called singularity. 2045, Ray Kurzweil of Google believes that human thinking will be surpassed by computer thinking, and what they call singularity. That's terrifying, because we're unlocking things that God never intended to be unlocked. We're learning things that, who's to say what, even though he is all-knowing and all-powerful, but who could have ever expected that billions of lines of data and code could be compiled into an algorithm now, out of a computer, and a quantum computer, whatever you want to call it, and coming up with coding that nobody could have ever pieced together. Not you and I, not in our lifetime. Well, that is now at our kids' fingertips. I mean, this phone is as big of a NASA computer not more than 20 years ago.
And again,
it's more powerful than, I'm sorry.
Knowledge shall increase in the latter days. Something to compare this to is for 5,000 years, say when Adam and Eve hit this planet, all the way up to when Jesus came, going a little bit forward to after Jesus. During that entire 5,000 year leap, man could only go from foot walking to boat. That was the fastest form of technological advancements that they had. Now, fast forward to today, and within 200 years, we go from riding in a boat to being able to make cars and automobiles, shooting rockets into space, going to the moon. These, creating a nuclear bomb, creating things like an iPhone, that just doesn't happen overnight. And I know this is kind of a side tip, but we have different versions on this. But I believe it has to deal with the Nephilim, the fallen angels of the Bible. And there is a time in which God said that they would be released in the latter days. And we could be seeing some of that technology leaked because there is no other explanation why the bang, why the gap, all of a sudden. If you study people like Tesla, they have statements from their own voices where they say they heard things from external sources, if you will. And so outside knowledge that they got or received. So it's an interesting study and a talk for another day, mind you. But the thing is too, God told us so many of these things would happen. And there's so much going on in today's day and age. So
you have to be aware. It's called, what I was trying to refer to earlier was Moore's Law. Moore's Law was one of the inventors of the Intel chip. And Moore's Law said every 2 years that computer knowledge would double. Well, exponentially. You can only imagine that increase. Now, I agree with Lisa in the fact that didn't happen only because we all of a sudden got that smart. No, I think we're being sold a bill of goods in a lot of cases. A lot of these laws that we've discussed earlier in the broadcast, they always have an ulterior motive. Why would one of them in particular, like the EU? It's kind of funny, and the one that Trump passed. Originally, Facebook and Google stood up against it. No, and then suddenly they determined, oh wait, this law can actually be used against the small guys. So silently, we're going to support it now. Go. And that's where big business and big intelligence and big computerization is overcoming the simple principles of life, which we've talked about so much, is how do we simplify life? How do you unplug but yet stay connected? It's a paradox that I don't know if anybody has an answer for, but that's kind of the key to success in this new world that we're discussing, because where is that fine line?
I think the line, is in God. As a Christian, a lot of that, it's hard because we all work in a technologically advanced era. We all work where we have to have I use this for my job every day. You use it for your job every day. You use it for yours. These are necessities now. If we don't have these, there really is, you're going to lose that communication barrier because everybody else has that option. So these are things that we have to take real. But I think, when you can sit down as a family and have that time, turn them off. Take advantage of that family time together. Have the kids turn it off. These are simple principles that we can apply and others can apply to have that bonding period, to have that time as a family. And I think it's needed because we're losing that sense of communication between people. And I think it's a very thin line, because if we can't communicate, and everything's done on the internet or on the phone or on the radio, or and you don't have the face-to-face contact, this is going to lead to a very hard place, especially when you have hospitality and things like that. But take it in prayer first and foremost. That would be my advice.
Well, what happens if you got to go to Dutch Bros and you see anti-Trump folks in the corner and you don't have your phone on you? What do? Yes, and for those on the radio, what happened yesterday is we're driving around, and on the way to one of our events, one of our kids' events, we had to stop by Dutch Bros, of course, because that's a prerequisite with our teenagers. And there was an anti-Trump protest going on in the corner, so of course my dear sweet Lisa decides to film it and voice her opinion to the protesters on the corner, and had to be taped and put up on the Facebook, which, that's why we use social media. We don't use social media, and this is kind of where I was heading with this. We don't use social media to put portions of our personal life out there, except for those that we very selectively pick, because there's privacy concerns that we have, there's safety concerns that we have, there's privacy of our children that we have. And that's kind of the same rules. We're going to reap by what we sow. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing that we're trying to do. And trust me, we're not perfect. We have to every day kind of think about how we handle things. And just like you, can I tell you 100% with any 100% certainty how to handle every part of your tech life? I can't. Because I learn every day how to improve it and how to implement, the Word of God against what's happening now, and to keep informed for my own protection. Because we still live in the United States of America, and we need to be very aware of where we're heading in that. And globally, where are we heading? But yet still stay within the word of the Lord and His laws.
True. Speaking of Donald Trump, and the people on the sidewalk were literally protesting something that Obama had put in. Obama is the one, and I know we're talking about Walmart FEMA camps,
yes.
As we got this last little section here, I'll bring it up. But former President Obama, when he was president, he enacted the child rules and legislations. He's the one that emptied the Walmarts, put FEMA camp, and what I mean by FEMA camp is detention facility, not an actual concentration camp like a lot of people think of in Nazi Germany. FEMA is the department, in this case it's run by Homeland Security, but it's similar to what we would call a FEMA camp. But Homeland Security goes in, empties out these Walmarts, puts gates inside the Walmarts, porta potties, and all kinds of these foil. You have the foil blankets, and these facilities are being used to house the children of the illegal immigrants that are crossing the border. All done by Obama in 2002. 2002, Obama put this up, and then as you go on, I think it's 2002. Does that sound about right?
All that matters
could be later.
All that matters is what happened. All that matters is what happened today.
Let me go back 8 years.
Yes.
But and then a lot of information was leaked in 2014, and I may be wrong on that 02 date. I'm trying to remember 8 years back when Obama was, but Anyhow, in 2014, it is when Obama started really implementing, I think 2014, even maybe 2010, 2014-ish, when we have some of these FEMA camps actually being converted. We had a big discussion on Walmarts on my channel a while back, and then actual senators have gone in and taken pictures. And now here's what's happening. The pictures were taken in 2014 under Obama. And here comes Trump with Obama's slag, because Obama created these things. Obama started these things. He lied to the American public and said these Walmarts were closing for plumbing issues. Plumbing. Then later we see their windows being tinted at Walmart, and they are being converted to illegal immigrant facilities for just the children. Why did they keep that from us? And now all of a sudden it's being pinned on President Trump. That's why I got so mad. And so these facilities are 100% real. I've got pictures on my channel. You guys go to lisahaven.news. The pictures are there under the Walmart article. And not only that, but you can Google it. And they're all 2014. These images are during and under Obama. So very important there, but you have rules and regulations that were passed under Obama, and all of this is not even Trump, and Trump is now attempting to stop it. He's attempting to go in.
He did today. I think we signed into law today that they can no longer separate children, so it's done.
It's done.
Very timely.
Very timely. And so now we have a president who undoes what Obama did, and then these idiot liberal lefts, and excuse my term, but they are really pushing and saying this is under Trump, when Trump isn't the one who did it. It was their own President Obama. But this is amazing. It's a big step. And here Trump is fixing this and making it better. Hopefully, we'll see some great progress in the future.
And I love what happened here, because CNN, and I'm reading here, what Trump's family separations executive order does. Well, obviously he said we can no longer separate families. Well, CNN, of course, Trump, and the reason this came up is because they were marching people at the border to test the wall. What's going to happen here? Well, who is organizing? Well, it was said that CNN was actually on the other side of the border organizing these people to march against it so that they can get their nice little article about FEMA camps to blame it on Mr. Trump, President Trump, so that they can cover it, but now they have to cover the fact that he signed the order against it. It's just hilarious when you watch how these things work and you cover it as, obviously Lisa does more on the political side, I do more on the tech side, but nonetheless, it's just interesting to watch how these stories generate and how they come back around and how uninformed people are by a media that's not giving them the entire message. So that's where we stand, and I can't wait to see where that's going to go. And executive order has been signed. I doubt anybody's going to work to overturn this one.
Awesome, and that's from the first time, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot to think about, I guess, ultimately. But yes, CNN always turns things.
Always.
And again, that's why I blew up the other day. I'm like, hello, that was Obama. Because they had this picture of, I wish I could show it, Madman, to you listen to, but it said Madman. It showed Trump's face and how Trump separates children. I'm like, no. And when I drove by, I yelled, no, that's Obama policy.
Yes.
But it's because the masses are listening to CNN, liberal leftist organizations, and listening to these groups of people saying, hey, they know what they're talking about, when in reality they're straight up lying to the American people, and they are eating it up, and through propaganda, eating up their propaganda, when in reality Trump has done a lot to save our country and to save America. And these camps are it's a very sad place. I encourage you guys to check it out. They're not good situations, and hopefully things will get better here in the future now that we've got a real president who does things like stomp on the TPP. He got rid of that, who's doing things like changing things around for the immigrant children. And that's what upsets me is Obama was so pro immigration, and yet he did that to children. What do you think about that? That's just...
There's so much right now that's happening in the news. It's just deplorable, and it's unreal, and we have to remember, we have to stay grounded. We have to stay grounded in the Bible. We have to stay grounded in our religions and our core beliefs, and that's what we have to continue to work with our children who are just being so desensitized towards... You just imagine the rise of media that none of our generations prior to them have ever had to contend with. So even we have to remain and become more knowledgeable to learn how to fight this, this demon of media that basically is out there. Because for our poor children, they don't know. I don't know fully yet how to monitor, how to help them understand. And that's really important. That's why we do what we do. And why, again, you have Lisa Haven on our YouTube channel and Justice Knight, Knighg. Follow our YouTube channels. That will help you we really try to keep it timely. The articles are always on things that are happening in the news currently. We try never to cover anything old because things are happening so quickly. There's never any shortage of topics.
Oh, no. There's a ton of stuff to cop. Now, we still got 4 more after that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. Sorry, under the radar. Make sure we're on time here for you guys. But, I guess ultimately the best thing to do is stay focused on God. As a Christian, what I want to do is just encourage all you viewers out there, just ask you, please keep us in prayer. Keep myself in prayer, Justice Knight in prayer, and let's just keep things at the forefront and not only pray, but let's, follow through. If you know your senator is passing some, anti-censorship regulation, get in there and either stand with your senator or move in the direction saying, hey, we're not going to vote you in if you go forward with this, but also stay in the loop. Make sure you're voting. Make sure you're out there making your voice heard. Make sure you're standing for these policies, because it's these kinds of things we have to remember are very important, because as a free people here in America, if we're not making our voices heard, then this could have very serious repercussions in the future. That said, here's one other thing for the Christians out there, because a lot of Christians come and they say to me, why do we vote? We're living in the end times. There's no point. And it's the worst thing you could probably say to me, because I'm like, no, God gave us America, a great country where we the people have a voice. We are the ones calling the shots. We were given that authority. So are you going to take that authority and go vote? Take that authority that God gave you, or are you going to stand before God in Judgment Day and say, I didn't vote because it was the end times and we were all going to die anyway, so what did it matter? We can't say that, because was it the end times 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Even in Jesus's day, people thought it was the end of days. They did. They all said, we're living in the end of days. No, it wasn't. 2,000 years later, here we are. Maybe some people who have died in history's past are standing before God now saying, hey, it was the end time, so I just stopped everything. You don't have that excuse, because God says, live your life for tomorrow. But act like he's coming today, but plan for tomorrow. So you want to have that life plan.
And I think that's important with everything. And also never give up the fight. Never give up the fight for knowledge. Never give up the fight. Because on my side of things, I read where people are so intimidated by what's happening around them that they want to close off. And that's very dangerous, because don't close off against the tyranny. Don't close off against the fight against this information, because anybody can come to understand at least a portion they need to. Follow and make sure you read the articles. Make sure you dig in a little bit deeper. Make sure you don't believe the first article you read, because that's always not the truth either. And that's the hardest part about media, and why these new regulations we talked about earlier are so important that they don't happen here. Because if you're given a one-sided argument and one-sided article, that's all you're going to be privy to. You'll never have a consenting or dissenting opinion, and that's the most dissenting opinion. I apologize. And that's the most important part that we all need to be aware. So just continue to remain vigilant. The information is out there, and like we've talked about, and we're not always on the same side of things, and that's the funny part about us, because we'll have these very heated debates about what side of things we should be on. But it opens your eyes.
Yeah.
It keeps your mind engaged. It keeps you fresh, and make sure that I always want to explore more, because when we come to the table and we're going to have a discussion, I want to make sure I know everything I do, because if you never want to argue against somebody, don't argue against Lisa Haven. It's usually an absolutely no-win situation.
So says Justice Knight. Well, share your website for all those who don't have it, so they can have that in your YouTube information.
That's
as well.
perfect. YouTube is Justice Knight. Like Lisa said earlier, it's JUSTUS and then KNIGHD. You bring that up, you'll find my channel. Also at www.justiceknight.com, you can find me, justiceknight.com. You'll also find my website. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the same things that you have,
And
obviously.
Patreon. You have Patreon.
And
He's got a link for Patreon there as well.
I do. PayPal, everything we need.
Awesome. And if you guys want to check out my channel, I've got lisahaven.news. You guys can check that out, and I encourage you, please subscribe to the newsletter there. With all this censorship, the surest way for me to keep in contact with you is for you to put your email in there, and I promise I don't send a bunch of junk mail. So same with Justice Knight. You can subscribe to his newsletter on his channel as well as separately, so you follow the both of us. He does a lot of various news, and I do different news as well. So it's different venues here that you've got, but both focused on the Christian viewpoint on those. So check that out, subscribe. Well, thanks again for tuning into our channels. This is Lisa Haven, and that was
Justice Knight, signing out.